Okay guys, I've made quite a mess here, haven't I? I'm just restocking my bread flour with wheat prices absolutely soaring and wheat very hard to get. I went down to the feed store the other day, no wheat, no pollard, nothing like that. And poor old chooks, I don't know what they're going to have, but anyway, no doubt they'll get enough. But I thought, well, even though I've got some bread flour put away, because the last time I bought bread flour, I bought 25 kilos of bread flour, and there's only me that pretty much eats it, so it would last quite a long time. I decided I'd go ahead and pick up another 12.5 kilo bag and put it away. So I'm just putting it into these containers, really packed tightly full, screwing down the lids. There's no way any oxygen is going to get in there, so any bugs or anything, they won't last long. They're all separate anyway. I don't have room in my freezers to put a great big bag, and I'm not handling it twice, so it just goes in these containers and then put away in a dark spot in the pantry, and that's where it'll sit until I need it. So I'm down to the last few cups, and as I need some bread, I'm on my last sort of crust now, and I plan on having that with some soup that I had done a lot earlier in the year, and then I packaged it up into little bags to last 2 or 3 feeds. So I'll have the crust of the bread with some nice thick vegetable soup, and that will be tonight's tea. But I will need fresh bread through the week, so I thought I'd bring you along with me and we'll make some bread together. So as I said, I've got the flour here, and as my work surface is already floured up, I don't have to worry about that, do I? So let me get the makings and get ready, and I'll bring you back when I'm about to put it together. So this is where a digital pair of scales comes in handy. And yes, I am going to mix it in my bread maker. Not going to cook it in the bread maker because I actually don't like the shape. It's not very workable for me. So, right, let's just bring up the thing. Now, first of all, I start with the yeast. Now this is a dry activated yeast. Most of it I keep in the freezer, and then I keep just a small amount out in this little container in the fridge. So we want 1 1/4 teaspoons of activated dry yeast. There we go. There's our yeast. You don't have to proof the yeast or anything like that. That's what makes it so good. Okay, now we have some powdered milk. You can use fresh milk in replacement of the water if you like, but I use powdered milk. And as I like a nice white fluffy loaf, I'm using 2 tablespoons and I use bread improver and 1 teaspoon heaped of bread improver. I think it just makes a nicer loaf personally. This is the Wallabies brand of bread improver. Now we need some sugar. And I think I want a nice sweet loaf, so 1 tablespoon of sugar. And we need some sort of fat. Now I'm going to use the butter that I made up. And we need 15 grams of the butter. This one's just about finished. I probably won't get 15 grams out of it, but we shall see. Well, I've got about 8 grams, so that's not bad there so far. And I pulled the other one out of the freezer just a minute ago, so it's still a little hard. Might need a bigger knife. Don't worry if it's frozen, doesn't matter. There we go. And we'll just drop that in. There we go, 15 grams. And I want mine fairly moist, so just chuck in a little bit, little dob more. Now we're going to put in 420 grams of bread flour. I prefer the bread flour because it makes a really nice light loaf. There we go. Now I usually wait until after the flour's gone in before I add my salt. The reason for that is salt will often take out the rising agent in the bread, in the yeast, and it will stop it from rising all the way up. Now with this size loaf I'm supposed to put in 1 1/4 teaspoons of salt, but I actually don't like it that salty. It's like licking into a salt lick. So I'm going to add probably 3/4 of a teaspoon. And that's enough to bring out all the flavours in the bread. Then I will add 315 mils of warm water. Now I'm using filtered water that I had in the kettle because it was nice and warm still, and I prefer the filtered water. So there we go. Now all I'm going to do is pop this into the bread machine, let it go through and do its thing, and it will let it rise once, and then I'll bring it out, push it down, put it into whatever receptacles that I've got, mainly the small bread pannikin that I've got, and I'm going to make some bread rolls as well, and I will bring you along for that. So in the machine this goes. Right, the bread's gone through its processes and now it's on the rise, and I will give it about an hour to rise before I take it out. In the meantime, I have prepared my little bread tin. I know it's got a non-stick surface, but the non-stick actually comes off on the bread, and I really don't like it. And unfortunately, you just can't get the old bread tins anymore. So I have lined it all with baking paper and baking sheets. And when it's ready, I'll put it in here. In the meantime, I've made some nice sultana scones with some leftover flour, and I'll probably pull them out fairly soon. Okay, so here's our scones, and I think they're done. Yep. They look pretty good, eh? Right. Now I don't want to scone you just yet, but I'll cut one out and show you. And there we go. How nice is that? Beautiful and fluffy. Beautiful with some butter. A little bit hot for me just yet, but I will enjoy them. Who's for afternoon tea? Well, here it is, guys. A lovely loaf in the bread maker. It does a good job. So all I need to do now is sprinkle a bit of flour out. There we go. Punch it down. Does make a bit of a sticky loaf, so it doesn't take long, and you just got to work a bit of flour into it, and it's very, very airy. Squeeze all that air out, otherwise you end up with huge big bubbles in your bread, and that's not what you're after. You're after a bit of a denser loaf. Just squeeze those air bubbles out. Okay. It usually picks up any of the flour that's around. Right. Now, I'll just cut it into little bits. Let's see. Bit more flour. It's still pretty wet, actually. Very tacky. There we go. Now we'll stretch and pull and bring it over to the centre. Just work that flour. Right, there's one ready. So, just give this a light spray now. And I'll put one in. I'm doing it this way so that I can actually split this loaf and make 2 loaves out of the one. Then I can freeze it and then cut it while it's frozen. Right, there's the next one ready to go in, and that will just sit on the baking tray. And this part here, I'm actually going to make into some dinner rolls. So, probably just small ones. We don't want dirty great big ones. So, cut it there, 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 there. If I had probably hand rolled it, it wouldn't be as tacky as this. But honestly, if you've got time or patience for all that anymore, I'm afraid I don't. There we go, there's another one. And honestly, this turns out much better though than if I had made it all by hand. So this way I'm not wasting bread now. Let's face it, it's usually we waste it all. And this method works for me, that's what I'm going to continue to do. So you do what works for you, and that's the way it goes. One more. Now, I could probably go over the tops of these with a little bit of milk, and that gives you a nice shiny top. Or when it comes out of the oven, you can run some butter over the top, but I can't be bothered. Besides that, I like a nice crispy loaf. There we go. And that's it. That will now go in the oven, and it will sit there until it's risen the way I want it to, and then I will put it in to cook for about 35 to 40 minutes, and I'll bring you along again when I'm pulling it out of the oven and we can see how it turned out together. And here is our bread, all risen and ready for the oven. These are the buns, and here is the bread. And yes, I will take the little clip off. So the oven's taking a minute to warm up, and I will put them in until they're done. They'll be cooked in about 35-40 minutes. There we go. I've just taken the bread out of the oven. You can always tell it's cooked by it sounds hollow. And that will be some lovely crusty rolls to go with my soup tonight. Well, that's how you make bread. Very easy. Thanks for coming along with me, guys, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.